One of the greatest challenges that the West is dealing with is that we simply cannot comprehend the mindset of a jihadist. Now, thank God for that. However, the downside here is that we have jihadists, and we have to understand that they're actually committed to death. We can't relate to that. And if we can't relate to that, then we continue to try and negotiate with someone who just wants you dead. They don't want to negotiate. Here's a fantastic conversation between Dan Senor and Sam Harris, understanding the mentality of a jihadist. Let's watch this together.
We just have to be sober and honest about the difference in the worldviews here. So, like, the hope from the secular left is that if only Hamas and the other Palestinians who came across the border on October 7th to rape and kill, and if only they understood the character of the people they were victimizing, they wouldn't have wanted to do any of that. Right? There's a misapprehension of the other here at the bottom here. If only they knew how loving and filled with compassion the kids at the Nova Music Festival really were, they would recognize, if you just held that mirror, that moral mirror up to them, they would recognize, oh my God, what are we doing? These are the wrong targets of our hatred, right? No, right? That's just not the case. They understand exactly who they were targeting, and it doesn't matter. That's not the level at which this animus is formed. There's a belief system about spreading the one true faith to the ends of the earth, waging holy war, and dying in the process of killing infidels and Jews and apostates, and having your children die under those circumstances. That is the best thing that can possibly happen to you. It's the only certain way to get straight into paradise without any math to be done on your account on the day of judgment. I mean, you just go straight past the velvet rope into rivers of milk and honey. And the thing that secular people have to get over is their initial doubt, and it can take people, this can be an insuperable obstacle for people, that anyone really believes this stuff. I have met anthropologists who are absolutely sure that nobody believes in paradise and that it's all just posturing. It's all just politics and economics. And it doesn't matter how many people, when you hear the person's reasons, when they state their reasons, when you have their martyrdom video, when you've bugged their mosque and you know what they were saying in private about paradise and about 72 virgins, when the people who are telling us that we love death more than you infidels, you Jews, you Israelis, you Americans love life, right? They are being honest. Now, yes, I'm sure you can find the one case of the person who was forced to say it, or the one case of the person who was posturing, but the idea that most jihadists, most of the time, aren't being honest in their view of paradise and their expectation of paradise. It's disconfirmed by an endless number of examples. And what's amazing is that they can do no wrong with respect to the rest of world opinion, right, or so much of world opinion. Right? That's the thing that is diagnostic of this whole moral delusion. Again, it does sort of follow Paul Berman's brilliant insight that, okay, you make the violence against the Jews as extreme as you want. The more extreme you make it, I'm going to blame the Jews more and more for whatever they did to inspire that violence. Right? Like that's the math going on in the background. And that calculation started running on October 8th in our most enlightened institutions, apparently. And it's based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what Israel has faced and what the West faces, and honestly what the Muslim world faces with a subset of its population. I mean, the end game here is not that America and Israel finally kill enough jihadists, though I honestly think near term that has to happen. I think military victory without apology over groups like Hamas has to be the near term goal. And any negotiation with Hamas of the sort you just described or any other, you have to recognize is always them just buying time for the genocide that they are going to try to commit when they are strong enough to try to commit it.
And by the way, they don't even pretend. I mean, no. Khaled Mashal, who's one of the two leaders of, or was one of the two leaders of Hamas internationally. He was interviewed soon after October 7th by one of the Arab satellite channel journalists, and she asked him, what's the solution? Is there a way? Could they give you something where you would say, okay, we're done. They have a state. And he said, one state, a caliphate, not just from the river to the sea. So basically not just from east to west, but from Rosh Hanikra down to Eilat, meaning from all the way from the north all the way to the south, meaning it's all ours. It's all ours.
Yeah. The endgame can't just be the successful promulgation of a endless war against jihadists. I don't think that's avoidable, but I think the real success will be something like 2 billion Muslims recognizing that they want no part of jihadism, right? And that they anathematize it and cordon it off and collaborate in its destruction, right? Like they have to view jihadism the way non-Muslims who are the victims of jihadism view jihadism. Because the truth is, the most common victim of jihadist atrocities are Muslims themselves, right? I mean, if you just look at it, as a global phenomenon, there's nobody suffering the consequences of jihadism more than the Muslim community worldwide. So the thing that is so toxic and so destabilizing is this reflexive and tribal solidarity we see throughout the Muslim world, simply because these people are Muslims in conflict with non-Muslims, with Israelis, with Jews, with Westerners, who can have a lot to apologize for colonialism and imperialism, et cetera, et cetera. There's some story that aligns them by default with, again, people who are behaving like total psychopaths, who don't, if you actually look closely at what they want, they don't want what most Muslims worldwide want. I mean, most Muslims worldwide do not want to live in anything like the caliphate as envisioned by the Islamic State or Hamas, right? Now, an uncomfortable number actually do, right? I mean, this is the larger sociological and political problem that we have to face. But we, again, includes some considerable number of secular Muslims, liberal Muslims, moderate Muslims, merely conservative Muslims who still want no part of Islamism or jihadism. I mean, you can divide this into an increasingly complicated Venn diagram, but we have to win a war of ideas with the Muslim world in 100 countries to draw a bright line around this species of religious fanaticism, which is, again, only exists within Islam. It's only within Islam that you're facing this kind of death cult behavior. It's only in Islam where you take your life in your hands to criticize the faith as a member of the faith or as someone outside the faith. I mean, just look at the experience of Salman Rushdie, right? I mean, it's like he spent 30 years dodging theocrats and eventually got stabbed on stage in the center of the center of the center of secular, tolerant, American, peace-loving politics. And the meme that is preventing an honest conversation about the scope of this problem is this notion of Islamophobia, that it gets trotted out immediately the moment anyone starts making noises of the sort I've just made on this podcast. And it has to be seen for what it is. It is a conscious effort to conflate any criticism of specific doctrines within Islam, doctrines that are leading to a kind of violence we see nowhere else, doctrines around martyrdom and jihad especially, and apostasy, right? And it's trying to draw a specific analogy to anti-Semitism, right? So that you have anti-Semitism on the one hand.
Yeah, or racism. Yeah.
Right. It's just not real, right? I mean, so
explain that. Well, why isn't it real?
Well, for a number of reasons. One is that you just have to look at the differences between the two religions. I mean, so anti-Semitism, hatred of Jews, is a real phenomenon because the Jews, generally speaking, are both conceive of themselves as an ethnicity and a race, right? And there's some conversion into the faith, but not much. And they're conceived by their enemies, by the people who hate them, as an ethnicity and a race. It was certainly racialized by the Nazis. And a lot of that thinking has been plowed back into the Muslim world. So that there's been a lot of import from Nazism into the anti-Semitism that's exists in the Muslim world. So it is true to say that most anti-Semites most of the time are people who hate what they imagine the Jews to be as a race, as a people. It's not that they're worried about specific doctrines within Judaism and what those doctrines are translating into politics and into the behavior of extremist Jews. That no one's getting on a plane worried about, whether there's a suicidal extremist Jew who might blow the plane up, right? It's just not. That's just not what's happening, right? The concern about Islam and the specific ideas within Islam that are producing this death cult behavior under the aegis of jihadism, and producing the increasingly bullying behavior that's at odds with modern secular pluralistic values under the aegis of Islamism, that is a concern about the specific ideas and what they're getting people in 100 countries to do. And here the difference between a missionary and a non-missionary faith is crucial, because Islam is an aggressively missionary faith. It's probably the fastest growing religion on earth. To say that someone is Muslim is to say absolutely nothing about their race or their ethnicity. It's like you and I could become Muslim in 5 seconds by converting right now on this podcast, right?
Which would be a first for the Call Me Back podcast.
Yes. Surprising as that would be, we could do it. Islam is a set of ideas. It's not a race. It's not an ethnicity. It has nothing to do with a person's nationality. Everything I say about Islam that is derogatory applies just as much to a Western convert from Marin County, like John Walker Lind, who fought with the Taliban, and it has absolutely no application to people who just happen to come from countries like Pakistan or Somalia, or who don't share these ideas, right? So to call it racism is a complete logical non-starter. And when I talk about Islam being of unique concern as a religion and as a set of ideas, right, what I get hit with from the apologists for Islam, whatever their actual other commitments happen to be, is he's just an Islamophobe and a bigot and a racist. Right. I mean, this is why I got hit by with Ben
Affleck. I watched it. I mean, your ability to trigger people knows no bounds.
We've since buried the hatchet, but that's what happened 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So the thing we have to realize is we don't want more jihadists and Islamists in our society. And what does that mean? It means we don't want people who are coming into our society with no intention at all of sharing the values of our society, but in fact are coming in with the conscious project of using the values of tolerance and pluralism to subvert those very values, right? So like to come in and say, you have to tolerate my religious intolerance to the breaking point, right? You have to, and that's what, to a remarkable degree, that has happened in Western Europe in a way that is clearly unsustainable, right? And is clearly producing a backlash of right-wing bigotry and intolerance. This is a line from David Frum, and I think it's true. It's like if liberals won't police borders, fascists will, right? And eventually, left-wing secular confusion about the character of these failures of assimilation, bringing in jihadists and Islamists into countries like the UK, those failures will produce a right-wing backlash, which will create support for genuine fascists on the other side, right?